Hello students of GEC 109. Today we are going to talk about Jose Rizal, his family background and early education. All of this are from his journal he wrote entitled, Memoirs of a Student in Manila, which he had written from 1879 to 1881 when he was 17 years old. This is first part of our lectures on Rizal's life, and here we will only be talking about his childhood until his admittance to the University of Sto. Tomas. What you will do after watching this is to evaluate Rizal's family, childhood, and early education and determine how all of these have influenced Rizal and shaped him as the person we know him to be. Let's go. Jose Rizal was born on the moonlit night of Wednesday, June 19, 1861 in the lakeshore town of Calamba, Laguna. His name, Jose, was chosen by his mother, who was a devotee of the Christian saint San Jose, Saint Joseph. He was baptized in the Catholic Church of his town on June 22, aged 3 days old, by the parish priest Father Rufino Calants. His godfather was Father Pedro Casanas, a close friend of the Rizal family. Father Calants was impressed by the baby's big head and said, "Take good care of this child, for someday he will become a great man." His father Francisco Ingracio Alejandro Mercado Rizal was a tenant farmer from Binan City, Calabarzon, Philippines. Francisco Mercado was only 8 years old when his father died. He attended the Latin school in Binan where his sons would later matriculate. He also attended the Colegio de San Jose in Manila where he studied Latin and philosophy. He was described by historian Rafael Palma. He was 40, of solid shoulders, strong constitution, rather tall than short, of serious and reflective mien, with prominent forehead and large dark eyes. A pure Filipino. He was married to Teodora Alonzo Realonda, daughter of Lorenzo Alberto Alonzo and Brigida O. Quintos. Teodora was fond of his son Jose, which Rizal lovingly said of her, "My mother is a woman of more than ordinary culture. She knows literature and speaks Spanish better than I. She corrected my poems and gave me good advice when I was studying rhetoric. She is a mathematician and has read many books." It is said that her family was a descendant of Lacan Dula, the last native king of Tondo. God blessed the marriage of Francisco Rizal and Teodora Realonda with 11 children. 2 boys and 9 girls, namely Pachano Alonzo Mercado, Narcisa Rizal Lopez, Olympia Rizal Ubaldo, Lucia Rizal Herbosa, Maria Alonzo Mercado Rizal, Dr. Jose Rizal, Concepcion Alonzo Rizal, Josefa Alonzo Rizal, Trinidad Rizal and Soledad Rizal. Sibling relationship among the Rizal children was affectionately cordial. Years later, when Jose Rizal grew, he always called them Dona or Senora, if married, and Senorita, if single. The surname Mercado was the original surname of the Rizal family. Domingo Lamco, Jose's great-great-grandfather, adopted the name Rizal in 1731 and it became a second surname of the family. The name was given by Spanish alcalde mayor of Laguna, who was a family friend. Rizal belonged to an affluent middle-class family in what would be considered as the Principalia, or the educated upper class in the pueblos of the Spanish Philippines. They were one of the distinguished families in Calamba. The Rizal family had a simple, contented and happy life. When the children got into mischief, they were given a sound spanking. Evidently they believed in the maxim, spare the rod and spoil the child. In his journal, Rizal mentioned of his first sorrow the loss of his little sister Conca, which he really loved. She died of sickness when she was 3 years old. Rizal wrote that, "I lost my little sister Conca, and then for the first time I shed tears caused by love and grief." His parents, particularly his mother, were devout Catholics, so at the age of 3, he began to take part in the family prayers. When he was 5 years old, he was able to read haltingly the Spanish family Bible. His mother also made him memorize prayers in Latin. Early on, Rizal already showed signs of multiple intelligences, learned the alphabet at age 3 as a child, invented his own toys made of scrap paper, cloth remnants, old pieces of wool to create objects. At the age of 5, he began to make sketches and to mold in clay and wax objects. He learned the Latin language at age 7. At age 8, wrote essay Aking Mga Kababata, where the famous lines, Ang hindi magmahal essay saraling wika, daig par ang malansang isda. At age 9, could quote chapters and verses from the Bible as a child. He made use of the following results of his experiment to produce the colors he needed. Pepper green, root of the pot black, achuete maroon, duhat aubergine, rhizomes yellow. At age 11, he mastered the card game, Panganj, winning most of the time, and so on and so forth. It is believed that he got his artistic side from his father, who had brothers that were successful artists on their own right. Influences on the hero's boyhood. In the case of Rizal, he had all the favorable influences few other children in his lifetime enjoyed. Rizal's family was a mixture of races. They were a combination of Negrito, Malay, Indonesian, Japanese, Chinese, and Spanish, though Jose was predominantly Malayan. From his father he inherited a profound sense of self-respect, the love for work and the habit of independent thinking. And from his mother, religious nature, the spirit of self-sacrifice, and the passion for arts and literature. There were also other people that influenced Jose Rizal growing up. From his siblings it was his big brother Pachano that instilled in his mind the love for freedom and justice. Pachano was a student activist in Stowe Thomas University and was friend of Father Jose Burgos. When the Gomburza fathers were executed, it was Pachano who explained to him the injustices that was happening in the colony. Rizal was known to be a polyglot. He was fluent in 22 languages: Hebrew, Filipino, Ilocano, Visayan, Sabanon, Chinese, Latin, Spanish, Greek, English, French, German, Arabic, Malay, Sanskrit, Dutch, Japanese, Catalan, Italian, Portuguese, Swedish and Russian, and had a knack for switching from one language to another when he was writing. And he was also a polymath, which means a person of great learning in several fields of study. He was a journalist, playwright, ophthalmologist, farmer, historian, painter, novelist, engineer, and educator. He also had varying degrees of expertise in economics, ethnology, sociology, anthropology, architecture, cartography, martial arts, dramatics, fencing, and pistol shooting. Okay, here we are also going to discuss Rizal's early education. A man known to be one of the staunch advocate of public education, Rizal believed that education is the catalyst for social change. Rizal had his early education in Calamba and Binan. It was a typical schooling that a son of an Ilustrado family received during his time, characterized by the 4 R's: reading, writing, arithmetic, and religion. Instruction was rigid and strict. Knowledge was forced into the minds of the pupils by means of the tedious memory method aided by the teacher's whip. Despite the defects of the Spanish system of elementary education, Rizal was able to acquire the necessary instruction preparatory for college work in Manila. It may be said that Rizal, who was born a physical weakling, rose to become an intellectual giant not because of, but rather in spite of, the outmoded and backward system of instruction obtaining in the Philippines during the last decades of Spanish regime. The first teacher of Rizal was his mother, who was a remarkable woman of good character and fine culture. On her lap, he learned at the age of 3 the alphabet and the prayers. "My mother," wrote Rizal in his student memoirs, "taught me how to read and to say haltingly the humble prayers which I raised fervently to God." As tutor, Dona Teodora was patient, conscientious, and understanding. It was she who first discovered that her son had a talent for poetry. Accordingly, she encouraged him to write poems. To lighten the monotony of memorizing the ABCs and to stimulate her son's imagination, she related many stories. As Jose grew older, his parents employed private tutors to give him lessons at home. The first was Maestro Celestino and the second, Maestro Lucas Padua. Later, an old man named Leon Monroy, a former classmate of Rizal's father, became the boy's tutor. This old teacher lived at the Rizal home and instructed Jose in Spanish and Latin. Unfortunately, he did not live long. He died 5 months later. After Monroy's death, the hero's parents decided to send their gifted son to a private school in Binan. His teacher in Binan was a severe disciplinarian. His name was Justiniano Aquino Cruz. He was a tall man, lean and long-necked, with a sharp nose and a body slightly bent forward. He used to wear a siname shirt woven by the deft hands of Batangas women. He knew by memory the grammars of Nebria and Gainza. To this add a severity which, in my judgment I have made of him, which is all I remember. Later on Rizal left Binan and went to Ateneo Municipal. The Jesuits were considered the best educators of Spain, and perhaps of Europe, and so, when they were permitted to return to the Philippines, although their power to administer parishes was restricted except in the remote regions of Mindanao, the privilege of founding colleges, they had to apply to the city of Manila for subsidies. That is why the college, which began to function in the year 1865, was called the Ateneo Municipal. To enter the Ateneo, a candidate was subjected to an entrance examination on Christian doctrine, reading, writing, grammar, and elementary arithmetic. José did not take his entrance examinations. José did not remain in Manila but returned first to his town to celebrate the fiesta of its patron saint. It was then that his father changed his mind and decided to send him to the Ateneo instead. Since Mercado, the first surname of the family, had come under suspicion of the authorities because it was the name used by Pachano when he was studying and working with Father Burgos, in whose house he lived, José adopted the second surname, Rizal. The Jesuitical system of instruction was considered more advanced than that of other colleges in that epoch. Its discipline was rigid and its methods less mechanical. It introduced physical culture as part of its program as well as the cultivation of the arts, such as music, drawing, and painting. It also establishes vocational courses in agriculture, commerce, and mechanics as a religious institute. Its principal purpose was to mold the character and the will of the boys to comply more easily with the precepts of the church. The students heard Mass before the beginning of the class, which was opened and closed with prayers. In the first 2 terms the classes were divided into groups of interns and externs. The first constituted the Roman Empire and the second, the Carthaginian Empire. In each empire there were 5 dignitaries: emperor, tribune, decurion, centurion, and standard bearer. These dignities were won by means of individual competitions in which it was necessary to catch one's adversary in error 3 times. The empires considered themselves in perpetual warfare, and when an individual of one empire was caught in error by one belonging to the enemy empire, a point was counted in favor of the latter. At the end of each week or 2, the points in favor of each were added and the empire, which obtained more point, was declared winner. There was a fraternity of Mary and St. Louis Gonzaga, to which only those who distinguished themselves in the class for their piety and diligence could belong. This fraternity met on Sundays and after Mass held public programs in which poems were recited or debates were held. With all these inducements it was only natural that should be a spirit of emulation, a striving to surpass one's colleagues found in the Ateneo. Rizal really enjoyed his time in Ateneo, which in his memoirs he would say that his glory days was his time with his Jesuit professors. About that time he devoted himself to reading novels, and one of those he enjoyed most was Dumas' Father, the Count of Monte Cristo, the sufferings of the hero of the 12 years. He also asked his father to buy him a copy of the Universal History by Cesar Cantanu, and according to himself he profited much from its perusal. The family, who saw in José great aptitude for study, decided to place him as intern or boarding student in the college the following year. In the corner of the dormitory facing the sea and the pier José passed his 2 years of internship. In the 4th year of his course he had Father Francisco Sanchez as professor. José describes him as a model of rectitude, a solicitude, and love for the student, and has studied mathematics, rhetoric, and Greek, and he must have progressed much, for at the end of the year he obtained 5 medals, which pleased him immensely because with them I could repay my father somewhat for his sacrifices. He also devoted time to painting and sculpture. In drawing and painting he was under the guidance and direction of the Ateneo professor, the Peninsular Don Augustin Saez, who honored him with his affection and consideration because of his progress. In sculpture his instructor was a Filipino, Romualdo de Jesus, who felt proud in the last years of his life of having had such an excellent pupil. José Rizal, having completed his Bachelor en Artes at the Ateneo Municipal, was now eligible for higher education at a university. His mother, Dona Teodora, had second thoughts about sending her son to school because of the previous incident involving the execution of Friars Gomez, Burgos and Zamora. However, it was Don Francisco who decided his son should to the University of Santo Tomas, a prestigious institution run by the Dominican order. On April 1877 Rizal enrolled in UST taking the course on philosophy and letters. Rizal, upon entering the university, was not certain which course of study he wanted to pursue. The Jesuit priests who had been his former mentors had advised him to take up farming, or to join the order and be a man of the cloth. However, his tastes went towards law, literature, or medicine. In the end, he decided to sign up for philosophy and letters during his freshman year because of the following reasons. It was what his father would have wanted for him. He had failed to seek the advice of the rector of the Ateneo, Father Ramon Pablo. As part of the course, he had to complete units in the following subjects: cosmology and metaphysics, theodicy, history of philosophy. His report card was very impressive. After completing his first year, Rizal decided to take up medicine as his university course. This change of heart was due to two factors. Father Ramon Pablo, rector of the Ateneo, had advised him to pursue the course. Rizal's mother had failing eyesight and he thought he owed it to her to become a doctor and cure her condition. Rizal's performance at the University of Santo Tomas was not as excellent as his time at the Ateneo. His grades after shifting to medicine had suffered as well. He frequently visited Ateneo and continued to participate actively in the Ateneo's extracurricular activities. He was the president of the Academy of Spanish Literature and then secretary of the Academy of Natural Sciences. When Rizal was a freshman medical student at the University of Santo Tomas, he got his first taste of Spanish brutality. One dark night in Calamba, during his summer vacation in 1880, he was walking in the street. He dimly perceived the figure of a man while passing him. Not knowing the person due to darkness, he did not salute or say a courteous good evening. The vague figure was a lieutenant of the Guardia Civil. With a snarl, he turned upon Rizal, whipped out a sword and brutally slashed the latter on the back. The wound was not serious, but it was painful. When he recovered, Rizal reported the incident to General Primo de Rivera, the Spanish Governor-General of the Philippines at that time. But nothing came out of his complaint, because he was an Indio, and the abusive lieutenant was a Spaniard. In a letter to Blumentritt, dated March 21, 1887, he related, "I went to the Captain General but I could not obtain any justice, my wound lasted 2 weeks." Unfortunately, Rizal was not happy at UST and this reflected on his grades, Zaid and Zaid, 1999. There were three main factors that contributed to his unhappiness at the university, namely, the Dominican professors were hostile to him. Filipino students suffered discrimination. The method of instruction at UST was obsolete and repressive. Despite having a poor performance in the academic, Rizal was productive in the literary side of things. He wrote two major works, to the Filipino youth, A la Juventud Filipina 1879, which he submitted in a literary contest in Artistic Literary Lyceum, and The Council of Gods, El Consejo de los Dioses 1880, which was Rizal's entry to the Artistic Literary Lyceum when they opened another literary contest to commemorate the 4th centennial of the death of the Spain's glorified man of letters and famous writer of Don Quixote, Cervantes. Rizal was 18 years old when he submitted his poem entitled A la Juventud Filipina to the Filipino youth, and he won the first prize, a feather-shaped, gold ribbon-decorated silver pen. Rizal also won the first prize for his Council of Gods. He received a gold ring engraved with bust of Cervantes. In these early literary works, Rizal already shown some spark of nationalism in them which would eventually develop more later in his life. The boy Jose always distinguished himself in class and succeeded in surpassing many of his older classmates. In his Sto Tomas days he was the champion of Filipino students. There were frequent student brawls between the Filipinos and the Spaniards and Rizal would always lead the Filipino students against the Spaniards. In 1880 he founded Compañerismo, Comradeship, a secret society of Filipino UST students. The members were called Companions of Jehu. He was the chief of the society. His cousin, Gallicano Apacible, was the secretary. In one of the skirmishes, Rizal was wounded on the head. His friends brought him to Casa Tomasina where Leonor Rivera took care of him. Rizal did not finish his schooling in UST for he believed that he cannot learn anything from such hostile and discriminatory environment. Prompted by his brother and his curiosity to see the world, Rizal decided to finish his studies abroad. Rizal decided to study in Spain after finishing the 4th year of his medical course. The following are facsimiles of the memoirs. To foretell the destiny of a nation, it is necessary to open the book that tells of her past. Dr. Jose Protachio Rizal Mercado y Alonso Realonda. Thank you.